Hello mamas and welcome back to the Pregnancy with Physio Laura podcast. Today's episode is a bit of a different one for me, talking all things parenting. So I decided to make this episode a standalone one as I had so many questions coming through about how I personally managed adding a third child to our family mix, how I juggled my time between my children, etc., etc. So I felt it really deserved its own episode. Now, this is episode 7 of 7 in my pregnancy and birth podcast series. So if you haven't already listened to the first 6 episodes, go back and give them a listen at some stage as I explain my whole pregnancy journey, the nitty-gritty details of my birth story, and what my recovery looked like in the first 6 weeks after birth. Now, in today's episode, I share what transition was the hardest for me when going from kid to kid, how I juggle time for all of my children, how I play and care for the older kids whilst breastfeeding or looking after my baby, how I kid-proof my house, what activities I set up to entertain my older kids whilst I'm with my baby, the hardest part of my recovery with older children, mum and life hacks to help me stay sane and keep the household running smoothly, and the importance of my gratitude practice. Now, let's get into episode 7 of this 7-part pregnancy and birth series, chatting all about transitioning your family to an extra child. Enjoy! Hello, ladies. Now, today's episode is dedicated entirely to transitioning to a family of 3, which I also think will be relevant to anyone transitioning to an extra child. Now, the reason why I wanted to dedicate an entire episode to this topic is because I was flooded with questions about how did I transition to 3 children? How did my older kids find the transition? How did I look after myself, having to juggle myself between all of them? How was my physical recovery impacted by already having older kids? How did I make time to spend with each kid? Like, there was just so many questions. And so I felt like it would be a real service to you all to dedicate a whole episode to this topic. So if it's your first child, maybe you don't want to listen to this. Maybe it's not relevant to you at all because you're not trying to juggle or transition siblings or anything like that. However, if you're going from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 or God forbid 3 to 4, 4 to 5, maybe you'll find something in this episode that's useful or that you can relate to or something like that. So I've just picked sort of the main topics that I was asked and I'm just going to go through them just personally, what's worked for me. I am obviously no expert. I'm just an expert in my own family and my own kids, but you might find, something that's helpful or something that's relevant, or it might just make you feel less alone. So the first one I'll chat about is transitioning to 3 children. So a lot of people ask me, what has been the hardest jump from which kid to which kid sort of thing. So for me, I would have definitely said early days that the 2 to 3 jump was the hardest for me. I felt like I didn't have enough hands. All of a sudden we were outnumbered in the adult to child ratio, going from 2 to 3. My kids are also very close in age. So I've had 3 in 3.5 years. So they're still very dependent on us. So we have 2 in nappies. Most of them, there's always someone up at nighttime. It's not like they all sleep through the night. They're very young. So I think that also influences the age gaps and the transitions to different children. However, obviously the transition wasn't too intense because I feel like there may be a 4th baby still for us. And I'm definitely not hanging up my boots on having another kid. So if the transition was that traumatic, I wouldn't be thinking that we would consider another. So obviously it wasn't that bad. I kind of feel like once you've already had a couple of kids, you're in this stage of life, you're in the throes of nappies and snacks and, toddler tantrums and, having to really be with your children. They're not very independent. I feel like once you're in that stage of life, you add a few more kids in, there's really no extra chaos. Life's already pretty full and chaotic and amazing, and you're already changing nappies. The house is already a mess. You're juggling all the balls. That's why I wanted to have kids close together personally for me, because I wanted to be in the thick of that one stage of life at that one time and then move through all the different phases with all of my kids rather than having, one kid at teenage stage plus having a newborn, because there's such different needs and whatnot. And that's just personally what works for me. I'm sure there are so many pros to having bigger age gaps, but for me, I wanted to make all the chaos all at once, be in the thick of that one phase. However, my husband would say that the 0 to 1 jump was the hardest for him because it was a complete change of lifestyle. So you're going from being independent, self-sufficient, you do what you want with your time when you want, and then all of a sudden you've got a baby and life changes, and your schedule is around the baby and what they're doing and making sure their needs are met. And so he found that one to be the most hectic change. And again, like I said, he then found every time he added a child, well, you're already in the thick of it, so it wasn't really too much of a change. So that was his opinion. Now, another common topic or question I got was, how do I juggle time with all my 3 kids? And I imagine that that's obviously a point of worry for a lot of parents when they're pregnant. Like, how will I find time to spend with my eldest kids? So I read once from a child psychologist that 10 minutes of undivided attention to a child is ample amount to stay connected and bonded to each other. And I remember reading that and thinking, oh, that's so easy. 10 minutes, that's nothing. But it is actually quite hard to find 10 minutes of undivided attention. So no distractions, like looking each other in the eye, really, like no phones, no ducking in and out to do other chores or tasks, or just 10 minutes of undivided attention. Like, I certainly don't do it every day. Like, I aim to do it every day, but it's not as easy as it sounds. So my goal every day is to do that, to do 10 minutes of undivided attention for each child. So naturally, I have a lot of time bonding with my baby because we feed, we baby wear, we sleep together. Like, there's a lot of time there. So I feel like I fulfill her, attachment needs quite well. And with my eldest, he's 3.5. And so what I've done is I put him to sleep at nighttime. So that means that we always, no matter how much time we spend together during the day, we always get to finish the day together. We read books, we tell stories, we have lots of cuddles. So I get to tick that box and feel that attachment and bonding every day with him as well, which is awesome. And with my middle child, she's probably a little bit more... it's probably harder to fit that in with her. But fortunately, I feel like she's really bonded with her dad. So they have this really beautiful attachment together now since the baby has come along. So with her, I probably just try to grab moments throughout the day where I can. So I try to really look her in the eye, play with her, play with what she wants to play with rather than what I want to do. So really give her my attention like that. She really likes rough play. So I try to do this as much as I can and roll around with her and all those sorts of things. So that's how I've been trying to juggle time with all 3 of my kids. Now, naturally as well, my oldest 2 have started to play more together since the baby came along. So that's also been really helpful and really beautiful. And another thing we've been trying is my husband and I are trying to do a little more divide and conquer style. So he will take one child out for a coffee date or go to the park together while I spend time with the other 2. And it's not something we've ever done before, but it's actually working really, really well. And in the early days when I was less mobile and I was having a lot more rest and just bonding and forming that relationship with the baby, I was calling on my parents and my extended community to help entertain my older 2 so that they still were entertained and had lots of play and lots of attention during their day, even if it wasn't coming from me. So that's what we've been doing. It's working really, really well. Another theme that was coming through, lots of questions around caring for the older children with a newborn. And so I think people were asking for like practical tips. So that's what I thought I'd get into. So for me, I put baby Luca in the bouncer or the bassinet when I go and help with the other kids, so that it's so dangerous to have her on the floor with my toddlers running around, because whilst I don't believe they would do anything on purpose, there's so many accidents that could happen. She's just, it's not going to be safe. So always put her somewhere safer if I need to go and help them do something. I also make sure that my house is completely kid-proof. So when I am busy with her, whether I'm feeding or changing a nappy, I don't have to worry about anything too disastrous going on in another part of the house. So doesn't always work out. So I was just thinking about the other day, I was breastfeeding and my eldest had opened my bedroom door. So those doors my middle child can't reach, which is fantastic because she's the explorer of our family. So I always have my bedroom door closed because then she can gain access to my bedroom, my ensuite, and there's just too much that can happen in there. However, my eldest opened the door. So she just took that as free range. I was feeding and she managed to empty like half the toilet bowl water and half of the soap dispenser. It was a disaster. So it's not always foolproof, but for the most part, I have the doors that I don't want, those rooms messed up. I have those doors closed. I have activities set up in areas of the house where I really want my kids to be so I can see them, or so that I know they can't hurt themselves if I'm not there with them. Kid proofing my house for each child's unique destructive ways has been very helpful. I always am trying to set up new toys or activities for the kids so that it keeps them interested while I'm busy with my baby. So we've been rotating toys every week. That's been really helpful so they're really engaged with their playtime. I do lots of reading books whilst I'm breastfeeding. So I'll have baby on the boob and I'll have one kid on the left, one kid on the right, all over me while I'm reading books. But that's a really great way of us all being together whilst I'm feeding. And to be honest, sometimes I'm just really honest and I'll just say, look, mummy can't do that with you right now because I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing. I'm changing a nappy or I'm feeding or sometimes I'll just say, mummy can't do this right now because I just need a couple of minutes to have my cup of tea or because I just need to take some deep breaths. But I would really love to do that with you later. And for the most part, for my eldest, he's a bit older, he understands that. My middle child, not at all, but my eldest gets that. So sometimes I just communicate that with them. I always try and get them out in the morning for fresh air and exercise. I find that they're in such great moods when we do that. I'm in a good mood as well. So I know that baby will sleep in the morning. So I do a carrier sleep. I'll wear her and we'll go get fresh air, get some exercise. And then I find that we're not all like scratching at the walls, going crazy. So everyone's in a really good mood. We're really regulated and that really helps. Everyone's dynamic. And I also try to include my oldest kids in baby care. So they have lots of cuddles with their baby sister. For example, she does a little vomit. I'll say, oh, can you go and get mummy the towel so we can wipe it up? And then they'll wipe up, her spills and whatnot. And they love being a part of that. If I'm burping her, they might give her a little pat on the back. So I really try to include them in the dynamic and they love her so much. So that's really cool as well. Another question I got was, what's the hardest part of my recovery when I've got older children? So for me, the hardest part was not being able to be physical with them. So not being able to carry them or run around with them. So it broke my heart. My son kept asking me why I couldn't play chasey with him. And I had to explain to him, mummy can't run yet. And so that was the hardest part for me. It was the physical capabilities because they're so young. I need to be quite strong and physical with them because they do need to, be carried and lifted and whatnot. So that was really challenging. Also probably just not having as much downtime. So, when you've got one baby, you can rest or sleep or catch up on things when they sleep. But when you've got multiple kids, often you don't have them all down at the same time. My eldest doesn't nap anymore. So it's a good opportunity to spend quality time with them though, but it certainly means you don't get as much downtime. And then the last one I had was, how do we balance life with a family of 3? So having 3 children. So I thought I'd just share some of my little mum hacks or things that I've worked out work really well for me so I don't go insane. And so I feel like I'm on top of everything and I'm mentally well and the household is running smoothly. And obviously this is not foolproof. There's days where nothing goes to plan, but this is what I try and do to try and just keep everything a bit easier. So I never cook dinner at dinner time. Hot tip, don't ever do it. Everyone is always tired by then and losing their minds. Don't cook dinner at dinner time. So I cook dinner at lunchtime when hopefully at least one or maybe 2 of them are napping, or I cook bulk food on the days that my oldest 2 are in care. So they are in care twice a week, and they're the days where I try and do things like cooking that I know I can't do so easily when I've got all 3 at home. I've now also made sure that I get most of my food delivered, so I don't need to go to the shops because that's a nightmare with 3 kids. I actually wouldn't ever attempt that. We have regular locked in play dates throughout the week, so that's really good because then we know what our week looks like. We've got family and friends and community around us so our kids are entertained, but also so that mums get to have a social life and chat and catch up. So that's really important to me, is to have regular play dates locked in. I also try and use my kids as my own form of exercise, so that you're kind of playing with the kids, but also getting some exercise, killing two birds with one stone sort of thing. So whether that's that we'll go for a walk and they'll ride their bikes or their scooters, or I'll run around, well, not running because I'm still early days, but play with them, like do horsey rides and things that are pelvic floor friendly, but also gets to play with them, and I get to move my body and get some endorphins pumping as well. Communication, like I mentioned before, is key. So whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed, or like I'm starting to, I'm not coping with the mental load that I've got going on, or I'm finding something difficult, I express it straight away. So I'd communicate it to my husband. I'll then go and have some time out, or I'll go fill my cup up somehow, and then I come back, reset. And so communication for me has been key. I take time out before I bubble up and have a full-on meltdown. I make sure that I acknowledge, I'm not coping right now, so I'm going to step away and go, do something all on my own, or go do something different, or change up my environment so that I don't get to the bubbling over, meltdown, ragey point. I make sure that I try and either spend time with my hubby. Like lately we've been watching surf documentaries, which is awesome, after the kids go to bed, or I'll read a book, or I'll listen to a podcast, just so I'm filling my brain with like non-mum related things. So I find that really helpful, just to have something outside of those day-to-day, activities that's different for me. So like I said, documentaries or a podcast, or something a little bit different. I like doing that. And this one, so postpartum or motherhood rage is like a real thing. And maybe you haven't experienced it, but I certainly have. I don't really feel like I felt rage before I became a mum, but holy moly, like your nervous system is so overloaded at times. And rage is this new emotion that I've had to really work out, how do I deal with that? So look, this may or may not help you, but I have found roaring like a dinosaur has really helped me. So when I'm feeling like I'm about to bubble over and I want to scream or yell, or like, I just need to get something out of my system, rather than losing my temper and screaming or yelling, because I don't want to do that, what I do is I roar. Because what I found happens is it lets me get those emotions out of my system, but it's not scary, and it makes everyone laugh. So my kids think it's hilarious, and I'll roar at them, and I'll pretend I'm a dinosaur, and it lets me like let off some steam, but without being scary, or and it lightens the mood then, because they're laughing and then I start laughing, and then we pretend I'm a dinosaur and whatnot. So hot tip. If you get anything out of this podcast, who would have thought Physio Laura is talking about roaring like a dinosaur? And look, just to round that up, so woo-woo, but this is me to a core. I find that what helps me is just practicing gratitude and reminding myself like how damn lucky I am that I get to raise 3 beautiful humans in this world. And I remind myself that that's not a privilege that everyone gets to do. And I get to do that. Like I don't look at that as a burden when I practice gratitude. I don't look at that as something that's overwhelming when I practice gratitude. So when I'm feeling touched out, another thing that I remind myself is that some people are devoid of human touch. So some people will go days without touching people and having their oxytocin filled up. Whereas, I am touched out. I've got so much of it, but how beautiful is that? So yes, it's good to acknowledge, I'm touched out, I need to go and have 5 minutes to myself, but it's also good to practice gratitude for me and just remind myself I am so lucky. So they're my main tips for balancing that. I would always love to hear from you guys though. There's so much wisdom we can all share with each other about how you've transitioned to a family of more than one child. I hope that you got something useful. Hey mamas, Laura here. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and maybe had a laugh or two with me over some of my parenting strategies, or maybe you got some helpful tips if you're looking at adding another baby to your family mix. I really love talking about parenting and discussing this with my girlfriends, and I love hearing how other families navigate life and challenges, and I'm always learning from the other mums around me. So I do hope you enjoy this episode. And if you did enjoy this episode or you resonated with anything that I shared, I would love to hear from you over on my socials at PhysioLaura and share with me your top tips for transitioning your family to another baby. I will catch you soon for our next amazing podcast series that we have coming up. But until then, mamas, sending you wonderful pregnancy vibes and enjoy the incredible journey that is pregnancy.